Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
There are moments in your life where the air around you feels different, like time has slowed just a little, like the world is finally giving something back after years of kicking you in the teeth, and for me. That moment came the day I drove off the dealership lot in my cherry red Mustang convertible. Not just a car, not just four wheels and a loan payment. This thing was a battle flag, proof that I had survived every condescending look, every, "Are you sure you can afford that?" Every broken promise from a man who swore he'd love me forever, but packed up the dog and the furniture when he left. I'd rebuilt my life piece by piece, worked two jobs, fought through court dates and credit repair hell, skipped vacations, clipped coupons like it was a sport, all so I could have something that was mine. I remember gripping the leather wheel, the smell of it brand new and rich, like success finally had a scent, and driving down Route 23 with the top down and the wind throwing my hair into chaos. I didn't care how I looked. I didn't care what people thought. I was free in a way I hadn't felt since I was 23 and stupid and thought love was enough to build a life on. This car wasn't for show. It was a goddamn reward. And of course, that same week, my brother Derek came to visit. Derek, who somehow always had gas money but never a job. Derek, who once borrowed my rent money to invest in crypto and then blamed me for being impatient when I asked for it back 3 months later. Derek, who had lived rent-free in my parents' guest room for the better part of a decade, but still talked like he had everything figured out and the rest of us were just playing catch-up. He spotted the car in my driveway before I could even say hello. Whistled low and said, "Midlife crisis on wheels, huh?" With that stupid little smirk he wears when he wants to be funny but knows he's just being a dick. I rolled my eyes and told him it wasn't for him. He walked around it like he was appraising it, like he'd earned some right to touch what he didn't buy, and said, "Let me take it for a spin." I laughed, because surely he was joking. I told him no, point blank, like I was talking to a toddler who wanted to eat a crayon. "It's not a toy, Derek. And it's not yours." He pouted a little, made some crack about how I was being uptight, and dropped it, or so I thought. We ordered pizza, watched part of a game, he stayed over in the guest room, and I went to bed that night thinking maybe, for once, he'd shown a sliver of respect. I should have known better. I really should have. The next morning, I woke up and my stomach twisted the second I looked out the window. The driveway was empty. I blinked once, then again, thinking maybe I was looking at the wrong angle or maybe I'd parked further down the street. But I knew. I knew exactly what had happened. My keys were gone. So was my brother. I called him, barely able to keep the rage out of my voice, and he picked up laughing. "Don't worry," he said, like I'd misplaced a pair of socks. "I'll bring it back in one piece. She drives real smooth, by the way. Didn't think a little car like this could haul ass." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I told him to get his ass back immediately and hung up before I said something I'd regret. But he didn't come back in an hour. Or two. He came back nearly 4 hours later, not in my car, but in my mother's, and when I asked where the hell the Mustang was, he looked down at his phone like I was bothering him and said, "Yeah, about that, the photos didn't do it justice." The front was crumpled like a soda can, the windshield shattered, the driver's side door caved in like someone had taken a bat to it. He said it slid off the road when a deer came out of nowhere. But the kicker? He didn't even sound upset. Not remorseful. Not even embarrassed. When I demanded to know what the hell he was thinking, why he'd steal my car, why he was driving like a lunatic, why he didn't call me immediately after the crash, he shrugged and said, "It's not a big deal. You don't even deserve that car." That sentence, more than the crash, more than the betrayal, more than the silence that followed, that broke something in me. That told me exactly what he thought of me, and worse, what he thought he could get away with. By then, my parents had shown up, called by Derek before I could even dial, and I was ready for backup, support, something resembling justice. But instead, I got a lecture. My father said, "He's your brother, Jen. It was just a mistake." My mother said, "Honey, it's just a car. You're overreacting." I looked at them like strangers. I asked if they were joking. I asked if they realized the car was totaled, if they realized he took it without asking, if they even heard what he said to me. But they just stood there, arms crossed, waiting for me to calm down like I was the problem. And that was the moment I realized they weren't going to help me. They were going to protect him. Again. But what they didn't know, not Derek, not my parents, not anyone, was that I had something none of them expected. I had video. The first time Derek lied to our parents, he blamed me for a broken lamp in the living room, even though I was at a sleepover across town and couldn't have touched it if I tried. But that didn't stop our mother from calling me disrespectful and our father from grounding me for a week. I was 8. That was the moment I learned something every eldest daughter in a broken family eventually figures out. It doesn't matter what you say. It matters who says it first, and Derek always made sure his voice reached them before mine ever had a chance. So when I stood in the driveway, watching my brother lean casually against the hood of our mom's sedan with that smug, half-bored look on his face, and listened to him explain how the brakes locked up, and there was a deer, and I swear, Jenna said it was fine to take it, I wasn't even surprised. It was like watching a rerun of a show I didn't like the first time, one where I already knew the ending, and spoiler alert, the bad guy always walks away with a clean slate while I get painted as the overreacting, emotional one who needs to calm down. He lied with a straight face, looking our dad dead in the eye and saying, "She left the keys on the kitchen counter. She didn't say I couldn't take it." Then he added, like it was some kind of final blow, "Besides, she barely even drives it. That thing just sits in the garage looking pretty." My father nodded slowly, like that logic made sense, like it was somehow my fault for having something I didn't use often enough, and maybe if I weren't so selfish about it, none of this would have happened. My mom, always the peacemaker until it came time to defend me, reached out and touched my arm gently, like she was trying to calm down a wild horse. "Honey, he didn't mean any harm. You know how impulsive he can be. He just wanted to feel good for once." I wanted to laugh in her face. Feel good? He felt good enough to wreck the one thing I'd worked 10 years to earn. Actually, it was almost 10. I bought that car back in 2017, and it's 2023 now, so that's at least, well, 11 years, right? Their voices blurred together after that. My dad started talking about how insurance would cover it, how it wasn't worth fracturing the family over something so material, how people make mistakes and blood is thicker than steel and fiberglass. Derek played the victim, talking about how shaken up he was, how he hadn't meant to hurt anyone, how I was being dramatic for threatening to file a police report. My mom said I was embarrassing them in front of the neighbors, as if I was the one who stole something and crashed it into a tree. And through it all, I said nothing. I just stood there, letting the words hit me like raindrops off a metal roof, loud but not lasting. Because while they were busy rewriting the truth with a Sharpie and a smirk, I remembered something they didn't know. Something Derek couldn't know. When the neighborhood started getting hit with car break-ins last spring, I'd gotten nervous. Not just nervous like locking the doors nervous, I'd been through enough in my life to know that locks were more of a suggestion than a guarantee. So I paid a guy off Craigslist to install a small motion-triggered camera above the garage door. It was discreet, hardwired into the frame, and had a decent memory card that saved up to a week's worth of footage. I hadn't even told my closest friends, mostly because I didn't want to be that person who sounds paranoid. But in that moment, standing there watching my brother spin lies like silk, I felt every dollar I'd spent on that camera earn its keep. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't storm inside and declare my evidence like some courtroom drama. I let them finish their little therapy session in the driveway and watched as they all retreated inside, Derek leading the pack like the prodigal son returning after doing something brave instead of something reckless. My father gave me a stiff pat on the back and muttered, "Don't let this ruin things between you two," and I almost laughed in his face, because what things were left? Once they were gone, I went into my room, locked the door, and sat on the floor with my laptop and the tiny silver hard drive I kept in the bottom drawer of my desk. My hands shook a little when I plugged it in. Not from fear, not from nerves, but from that sick, adrenalized clarity you get when you realize you're not crazy after all. When you realize the truth is right there, waiting to be seen. I opened the video folder, sorted by date, and clicked on the most recent file. The screen lit up with a grainy but clear black and white view of my garage. I watched as Derek came into frame. He wasn't alone. A friend stood behind him. I couldn't see the guy's face clearly, but I could hear his voice. "You sure she won't freak out?" the friend asked. Derek laughed. "Please. She should be thanking me for taking that thing out. All she does is stare at it like it's her boyfriend." And then, like a cherry on top of the shit sundae, Derek said the one sentence that pulled the last thread of sympathy from my heart. "Jenna doesn't deserve that car. She never earned anything in her life. It's all a show." I paused the footage. I sat there, staring at the screen, at his frozen face mid-sentence, and I realized something else. He had no idea he was being watched. And what came next? He damn sure wasn't ready for that. I didn't just watch the footage once. I watched it 3 times, maybe 4, each time pressing pause at the exact same moment when Derek looked straight at the camera. Well, not directly at it, but right past it, as if my house, my life, my space meant nothing to him. Like he was walking into a store and shoplifting something on a dare. The first few seconds were quiet enough. Him and his buddy entering the garage, their footsteps echoing, the keys clearly visible on the hook right by the door, the one he pretended he didn't notice. The life fell apart frame by frame. But what came next scraped something raw inside me. Derek reached up, took the keys like he owned them, then looked over his shoulder and smirked at his friend. "She's not even gonna know," he said, twirling the keyring around his finger like he was spinning some toy he found in the street. "She never locks anything. She's so uptight, but deep down, she's soft. She'll cry a little, maybe yell, but she'll move on." Then he added the line that broke something in me, even though I'd thought it couldn't break anymore. "She's just a stuck-up bitch with something to prove. Always has been." I didn't breathe for a full 10 seconds. The footage kept playing, the audio clear, even if the picture had that washed-out gray security cam look. He opened the driver's door like he'd been waiting his whole life to do it, slid into the seat, and revved the engine hard enough to echo off the garage walls. His friend, still laughing, jumped into the passenger side holding what looked like a bottle of beer, maybe something stronger. They didn't care. They knew they were doing something wrong, and they treated it like a joke. The Mustang peeled out of my driveway like it was part of some bad action movie. Tires screeching, engine roaring, that beautiful paint glinting under the early morning sun. It wasn't just a joyride. It was a middle finger. To me. To the effort. To every sleepless night I'd spent building something from the rubble of my former life. And the final blow? When the car spun out, you could see it, even from the garage cam's limited view. When the tires lost grip and the angle twisted, there was laughter. Full, unfiltered laughter. Derek wasn't afraid. He wasn't hurt. He was laughing when my car slammed into that tree, the sound cutting off only when the engine did. I hit pause again, this time when the screen went black. Just silence. Stillness. I sat there with the laptop on my knees and a pit in my stomach that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with cold, heavy rage. Not the loud, yelling kind. Not the kind that explodes in real time. The kind that simmers, calculates, waits. The kind that burns quietly and for much longer. I copied the footage to 3 separate drives. One I hid at work in a folder labeled Q3 Expense Forecast. Another I backed up to cloud storage under a fake email I'd made during the divorce. And one stayed on the original device, right there in my drawer as a reminder. I didn't just want to have evidence. I wanted to have options. And once that was done, once the evidence was secure and the path was clear, I picked up my phone and texted my mother. Then my father. Then Derek. Dinner. Friday night. At my place. Nothing fancy, just want to talk. The responses were exactly what I expected. My mom replied with a heart emoji and a line about keeping the family strong. My dad didn't respond for 5 hours and then sent, "Okay." Derek sent a thumbs up and added, "Bring beer," followed by a laughing face. That one I stared at for a while, thinking about how quickly he'd fall apart once he realized the joke wasn't on me. Not this time. Friday came quickly. I cooked something decent, pot roast, mashed potatoes, the kind of meal our mom used to make on Sundays when she still cared about those kinds of things. I lit candles. I cleaned the house. I smiled at everyone who walked through the door like nothing had happened, like I wasn't holding the equivalent of a tactical nuke in my back pocket. Derek came in last, kissed me on the cheek like he hadn't spit on my dignity, and asked where the beer was. I handed him a bottle of something cheap and light, something that would taste like water going down and ball coming back up later. Dinner was stiff at first. Small talk. Compliments about the food. My father commenting on the traffic. My mother praising Derek for a new job he'd supposedly landed, but refused to describe in detail. I nodded through it all, nodding and smiling, playing the part, waiting for the moment to sink the hook. When dessert came, a store-bought pie I had no intention of pretending to bake, my mom leaned over and hugged me. Said, "I'm glad you're moving past all this. It's not worth holding on to anger, you know." I smiled, not warmly but not cruelly either. Just enough to keep her in that soft bubble of denial a little longer. "Oh, I'm not moving past it," I said, wiping my mouth delicately with the napkin. "I'm just getting started." They didn't understand what I meant. Not yet. But they would. The thing they don't tell you about revenge is that the best kind doesn't come with shouting or slamming doors or public breakdowns. It comes with patience, silence, and the subtle pleasure of letting someone else walk straight into the noose they've already tied with their own arrogance. That was the energy pulsing through me as I served dinner, smiling sweetly every time Derek made one of his smug, sideways comments about my cooking or how, "You've really mellowed out, sis." Like I was the one who owed him some kind of emotional reset for having the audacity to hold him accountable for what he did. He sat at the head of the table like he'd earned the seat, like he wasn't a guest in the home of the sister he'd screwed over less than a week ago. My mother cooed at him when he passed the potatoes, and my father offered him a second helping of roast like we were all still pretending this man hadn't stolen my keys, totaled my car, lied about it to my face, and called me a stuck-up bitch behind my back. I poured wine into their glasses with a steady hand, playing my part as the gracious hostess while every cell in my body screamed to fast forward to the main event. The tension at the table was thick, but carefully camouflaged, like when a dog knows something is wrong but hasn't figured out whether to growl or run. My mother chatted about her garden. My dad asked if I'd thought about refinancing the house. Derek went on about his new job in some vague-sounding startup where he claimed to be on track to manage a team in a few months. I nodded at all of it, smiling just enough to keep the illusion intact, all the while feeling the remote control in my pocket like a loaded weapon. I waited until dessert was done. No one even touched the pie, and I didn't push. I cleared the plates one by one, my movements calm and precise, letting the room settle into that post-meal lull, that perfect moment when people stop expecting more and start preparing to leave. That's when I reached for the remote and turned on the TV. They all looked up, confused at first, and I gave no introduction, no warning, just pressed play on the footage and let the silence fill the room like a slow leak in a sinking boat. The screen flickered to life with the grainy view of my garage, time-stamped and dated, just as I knew it would be. At first, there was nothing. Just the quiet, still image of my car, the same way I had left it the night before Derek decided to do whatever the hell he wanted with it. Then movement. Then voices. Derek and his friends stepped into frame, laughing. The friend said something about getting caught. Derek said she wouldn't notice. Then the line, that horrible, rage-inducing line, about how I didn't deserve it, about how I was just a stuck-up bitch with something to prove. The moment those words left the speakers, the energy in the room changed. My mother's eyes locked on the screen, her smile frozen in place. My father leaned forward slightly, suddenly not so eager to polish off his second glass of wine. Derek went pale, visibly pale, like the color drained from him in real time as his own voice played back at full volume, impossible to deny, impossible to spin. He opened his mouth, maybe to protest, maybe to lie, but I didn't give him the chance. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. I kept my eyes on the screen as the car roared to life, as he peeled out of the driveway like he was trying to outrun consequences. I heard the sound of tires screeching, of his friend egging him on, of Derek shouting something about seeing how fast it goes. And then, the crash. Not a fender bender. Not a bump. A full-body slam into something immovable, followed by a sickening silence that said everything no apology ever could. When it ended, no one said a word. My father was the first to break. He cleared his throat, stared at the now black screen, and asked, "When was this recorded?" I turned to face him, and my voice was cold, steady, and unshakable. "The day you told me I was overreacting." I let the weight of that sentence hang in the room like smoke. No one moved. My mother reached for her wine, then changed her mind and folded her hands in her lap. Derek kept his mouth shut for the first time in maybe his entire adult life. Then, without another word, I left the room. I walked down the hallway, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor, and retrieved what I had prepared earlier that day, a printed, itemized repair bill from the dealership where my Mustang had been towed. It included parts, labor, towing, paint matching, and the new tires. The total came out to a number that made my stomach churn and my heart race. But it was worth every penny. When I walked back into the dining room, no one was talking. The TV was off. The wine sat untouched. They were waiting, but for what, they didn't know. I dropped the envelope in front of Derek without a word. He didn't even reach for it. Yet, for a full 15 seconds, no one reached for the envelope I'd placed on the table like a final course none of them had ordered, but every one of them knew they deserved. The air in the room had gone dead silent, the kind of silence you don't hear often in real life. Not awkward silence, not even tense. It was that kind of heavy, soul-sinking silence that settles in right before something big changes forever. I could see Derek glance down at the paper in front of him, then up at my face, looking for some signal that I was bluffing, hoping, maybe, that I'd crack a smile and say this was all a joke. But I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I just stood there, hands at my sides, like a judge about to read a sentence that had already been written. My father leaned forward, put one hand on the envelope like he was about to pull it away, and asked with that same worn-out tone he used every time I tried to defend myself growing up, "What's this supposed to be?" I said it plainly, without raising my voice, without trying to soften the blow. "That's the full estimate for the repairs. $10,000 for the damage, another $3,000 for the deductible. You can double-check it if you want. I've got digital copies and the dealership's contact info in my email." He opened his mouth to argue, but I raised one hand, slow and calm, and added, "Before you say anything, let me finish." I turned toward Derek, who was now visibly sweating, not a full panic, but close, the kind of panic that creeps in when someone realizes the game they thought they were winning has just changed its rules. "I already spoke to the insurance company," I told him. "They've got the footage. Every second of it. The drinking, the speeding, the moment you took the keys without permission. If you or anyone else tries to file a claim or misrepresent what happened, they'll flag it as fraud, and I'll push for felony charges, vehicle theft, reckless endangerment, destruction of property. And since you're over 18 and not listed on my insurance, that's exactly how it would play out." My mother gasped softly, like I'd just mentioned something unthinkable. Derek opened his mouth, but nothing came out. My father started to raise his voice, tried to find his old authority, tried to act like he was still the one holding the reins. "This is your brother," he said, like I hadn't already figured that part out. "You're talking about ruining his life over a car." And that was when I lost whatever restraint I had left. I stepped closer, placed both hands on the table, and said, "No, Dad. He ruined my car. And then he lied about it. And then you helped him lie. You told me I didn't deserve it. You stood in my driveway and made excuses for someone who laughed while crashing the one thing I bought for myself after a decade of scraping and saving and sacrificing. So, if you want to talk about what's ruined, maybe start there." The room cracked then, not with sound but with realization. My mother blinked hard, lips pressed so tight they were white at the edges. My father looked like he wanted to yell but couldn't find a sentence that would land without shattering what was left of their version of the truth. And Derek, my brother, the golden boy, the king of second chances, just sat there, red-faced and still, Like maybe for the first time in his life, he realized that no one was coming to save him. Then I leaned back, smiled just a little, and twisted the knife. "I'm not pressing charges," I said, watching the flicker of relief pass through their eyes before I continued. "But I want every cent of that bill paid. By him. And I want it in monthly checks, handwritten, no direct deposit, no Venmo. He can drop them off in person or send them through the mail, but I want to see the envelope. I want the record. I want the receipt." Derek's voice finally cracked through, hoarse and shaky. "You've got to be kidding." I looked at him like I had never seen him before, not the boy who used to get away with everything, not the man who still acted like rules were optional. "You said I didn't deserve that car," I told him. "Now you can spend the next year reminding yourself what something earned actually looks like." My mother tried to plead, her voice cracking as she said, "Sweetheart, don't let this drive a wedge between you two. You're family." And I nodded, not out of agreement, but out of finality. "Exactly. We're family. And I'm giving him the same lesson you gave me growing up, that consequences are part of love, right?" I gathered the plates then, calmly, efficiently, like the dinner party hadn't just imploded, like I hadn't just flipped the table without ever raising my voice. No one stopped me. No one moved. When I came back for the glasses, my father finally muttered something under his breath about overreacting, and I just shook my head and said the words I'd been waiting to say for far too long. "I'm done letting you decide what's worth reacting to." And then I walked out of the dining room and out of that house, and I didn't turn back. I didn't wait for them to call after me. I didn't look for guilt in their eyes or hope for closure. Because the truth is, closure isn't always some dramatic moment of apology or understanding. Sometimes, it's just a door that closes behind you and stays closed. I bought another car 6 months later. Not a Mustang. Something quieter, something lower to the ground, something more practical, but something that didn't come with a single memory of proving anything to anyone. It started every morning without fail, and every mile I drove in it felt like I was putting more space between me and the version of myself that waited around for justice she had to fight for tooth and nail. And yet, sometimes, when the road is quiet and the night is darker than usual, I still wonder if they believed me. If they actually saw what was right in front of them, or if they only accepted it because the proof left them no other choice. Maybe I'll never really know. But what I do know is that some debts can't be paid in money. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't be billed anyway.